On a rainy evening, I set off from San Francisco, driving to Los Angeles for a crucial job interview. To save money, I chose to drive instead of flying. The success of the interview was critical to my future career, so I prepared extensively, which also added to my stress. My plan was to arrive in Los Angeles early Friday morning, giving me ample time to rest and prepare for the interview. However, the stress from work and a sleepless night left me feeling extremely fatigued during the drive. My headlights cut through the night, with rain creating distorted patterns on the windshield. Around midnight, while driving on a desolate highway, I began to feel drowsy. Suddenly, I noticed a figure by the roadside. It was a man in a black trench coat, standing in the rain, looking directly at my car. I found the sight disturbing but forced myself to continue driving. Soon after, I saw another man in a trench coat appearing ahead, mirroring the first man's stance. My unease intensified, but I pressed on, trying to ignore the eerie sight. Deciding to rest, I stopped at a small town's gas station. After buying a coffee to stay awake, I saw the trench coat man once again, this time standing at the gas station's entrance, staring directly at me. Terrified, I hurried back to my car, started the engine, and sped away from the station. My heart raced, and my palms sweated. To ensure my safety, I pulled over in a seemingly safe parking lot and reclined my seat, attempting to rest. However, as I began to doze off, I felt a strong sense of unease. While partially asleep, I sensed movement in the back seat. I opened my eyes wide and saw a blurry figure in the rearview mirror that resembled the trench coat man. In panic, I leapt out of the car, stumbling and running away. Returning to the car, I saw the back seat was empty. Realizing the terrifying experiences were likely hallucinations caused by extreme fatigue, I struggled to stay calm and continued my journey, ultimately reaching Los Angeles just before dawn. Despite my exhaustion, I attended the interview. The interviewer noticed my fatigue but appreciated my professionalism and offered me the job. Reflecting on the experience, I understood that the night's hallucinations and fears were the result of overwhelming stress and lack of sleep. Although the night was horrifying, it made me more resilient and mature. I was returning from a full day of work as a photographer. That day, I decided to take a lesser-known country road to avoid the busy city traffic. It was past midnight, and there were almost no cars on the road. All around me were endless stretches of dense forest and a blanket of silence. As I drove, I listened to soft music, feeling relaxed. Suddenly, my car alerted me with a low fuel warning. Sighing, I opened my navigation app to find the nearest gas station. The map showed a small gas station about 5 kilometers ahead, so I decided to stop there. A few minutes later, I pulled into a secluded gas station nestled in the woods. The station looked ordinary, with neon lights flickering faintly. The only other customer was a man filling up his old SUV. I parked my car and walked to the self-service pump, feeling the man's eyes on me. Though uneasy, I remained calm, quickly refueling and returning to my car. As I was about to leave, the man also returned to his vehicle and drove off. I breathed a sigh of relief, started my car, and continued on my way. But after driving for about 2 minutes, I noticed a car parked by the roadside. It was the same SUV, its lights off, almost hidden in the darkness. I felt something was wrong but kept driving. However, shortly after, I heard a strange noise, and the dashboard showed that one of my tires had lost pressure. My heart sank as I slowed down and pulled over. When I got out to check, I found that my rear tire was completely flat. I looked around in confusion, a disturbing thought crossing my mind. Did that man tamper with my car? I quickly grabbed my phone and started searching for the roadside assistance number. Just then, I heard the sound of an engine revving nearby. but I saw no headlights. The sound suddenly stopped, and the silence returned. I hurried back into my car, locking the doors, and nervously scanned the surroundings. In the distance, I noticed a faint glimmer of lights and realized that the SUV was parked not far from me. Holding my breath, I called 911. As I waited for the call to connect, I saw the SUV's door open, and the man began walking toward my car. I whispered my situation and location to the dispatcher, pleading for help. The operator assured me that police officers would be on their way and told me to stay calm and not reveal myself. At that moment, the call suddenly dropped, and my heart raced with fear. Minutes later, another car slowly approached. I watched as it stopped behind me, and the driver started talking to the man. It seemed like the man was fabricating a story, trying to deceive the newcomer. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I rushed out of my car and into the road, shouting, "Help me, he's trying to harm me." The driver immediately opened his door, letting me into his car while confronting the man. Sensing the situation turning against him, the man hurried back to his SUV, quickly driving away. A few minutes later, the police arrived, and I was finally safe. The officers took my statement and assured me that they would investigate the incident. That night, I was escorted home, grateful that I had made the right choices at the critical moment, avoiding what could have been a terrifying ordeal. I'm just an ordinary office worker, and every night I drive home along the same rural road. The road is secluded but scenic, especially in the summer nights when a gentle breeze sweeps through and the grass by the roadside shimmers under the moonlight. That night, I worked late as usual and was driving home in the dead of night. As I drove, I relaxed with some soft music playing in the car. I took the rural road as I usually do, expecting to be home in about 10 minutes. Not long after, I noticed a silver sedan parked by the side of the road ahead, its headlights still on, but the doors were shut, and I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I slowed down slightly and passed by the car, glancing inside, but I saw nothing. I figured it was probably someone from the village who had parked there and continued driving. However, after turning a bend, I saw another silver sedan parked by the roadside, identical to the one I had just seen. I was a bit puzzled. This road hardly had any traffic, so it was strange to encounter two identical cars in a row. I slowed down again and took a closer look at the license plate. To my horror, it was the same as the car I had just passed. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I told myself it was just a coincidence and kept driving. But after the next bend, I saw that same silver sedan for the third time, still parked by the roadside, with the same license plate, the same headlights. It was as if time had frozen in place. This time, I was thoroughly spooked. I stopped the car, opened the door, and instinctively walked towards the silver sedan, wanting to figure out what was going on. As I got closer, I saw that the car was empty, the doors were locked, and the surroundings were eerily quiet, with only my own footsteps echoing in the still night. My heart began to race, and I quickly turned back to my car, started the engine, and sped away from that road. I had no intention of stopping to inspect that eerie vehicle again. When I got home, I told my wife and friends about the incident, but they all thought I was just exhausted and imagining things. To reassure myself that I hadn't seen anything strange, I decided to drive the road again in daylight the next day. The next day, under the bright sunlight, I drove the road again. It was completely empty, no silver sedan, no signs of anything unusual. I felt a little relieved, thinking I must have been overly tense the previous night. However, when I got home, I suddenly received a news alert. A silver sedan had been found on that same rural road, with the body inside a woman who had been missing for several days. I was so shocked I almost dropped my phone. The photo in the news was the exact car I had seen the previous night, and the location where the body was found was the same spot where I had seen that car. I haven't driven that road since. I don't know what really happened that night, but I distinctly remember that car being empty. And now, it has become the site of a missing persons case. I can't help but wonder if that car was truly empty that night, or if I had missed something even more terrifying. On a gloomy evening, I was driving alone to a remote mountain area, planning to spend a quiet weekend there. The weather forecast mentioned heavy rain, but I felt confident in handling it and didn't give it much thought. As I drove, the rain gradually intensified, pounding against the roof and windshield, blurring my vision. Far from the city lights, darkness seemed to engulf the entire world. I tried turning on the radio to stay awake, but the weak signal only produced intermittent static, making me even more uneasy. About an hour away from my destination, the car's engine suddenly made a low, muffled noise, and the temperature gauge on the dashboard shot up. Realizing the car was overheating, I quickly slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. The rain outside was relentless, and the silence inside the car was deafening. I anxiously tried to check the engine, but in the downpour, I couldn't see what was wrong. Frustrated, I got back into the car and tried calling for help, but the signal was too weak to connect to any number. The rain continued to beat against the windows, as if forewarning me of something ominous. Left with no other option, I sat in the car, waiting and hoping for the signal to return or for another vehicle to pass by. Just as I was about to lose hope, an old pickup truck suddenly appeared in the distance, its headlights dim and hazy through the rain. I quickly regained my composure, opened the door, and waved, hoping the driver would stop and help. The pickup truck slowed down and stopped beside me, and a man wearing a heavy raincoat leaned out of the window. "Need some help?" His voice was low and muffled by the rain. Grateful, I nodded and briefly explained my situation. He quickly handed me an old phone. "Try this. It should have better signal," he said calmly. I took the phone, called my friend, briefly explained my situation, and gave him my location. My friend advised me to find a safe spot to wait for him. After hanging up, I returned the phone to the man and thanked him. He simply nodded, said nothing more, and drove away. Sitting alone in the car, I gradually began to calm down. However, not long after, a sudden, urgent knocking on the window made my heart race again. I turned to look and saw a vague figure standing outside, rain streaming down his form, his hands pressed against the glass as if seeking help. The darkness outside, combined with the rain, made it impossible to see his face. "What do you need help with?" I asked cautiously. He didn't answer, just continued to tap on the window, seemingly trying to get me to open the door. My instincts kicked in, and I hesitated. I hadn't seen any other vehicles on this road after the kind man had left. Where had this person come from? Quickly, I started the engine, intending to leave this unsettling situation. As soon as the car started, the figure outside began banging on the window with increasing force. My heart tightened, and I slammed on the gas pedal. The car skidded on the wet road before finally gaining traction and speeding off. After escaping that suspicious figure, I drove faster, my heart still pounding. It wasn't until I saw some lights in the distance that I slowed down and noticed a familiar car parked by the roadside. It was my friend. He got out and, seeing my state, looked at me with concern. We made it safely back to a secure location later, but the events of that rainy night remained etched in my mind. It was my instinct and quick decision that saved me from potential danger and taught me the importance of trusting my intuition. This adventure made me realize that, in addition to the threats posed by nature, there are unknown dangers lurking in the shadows of the dark and rainy night. On a late summer evening, after dinner, I decided to take a drive around town, as I often did. I chose a new, unfamiliar road, hoping to find something different. The road meandered through a nearly uninhabited mountainous area, flanked by towering pines and dense shrubs that seemed to conceal unknown dangers. The rain pitter-pattered on the windshield, creating a quiet yet unsettling rhythm. After driving for a while, I noticed a faint light through the trees ahead. It was a solitary house, hidden among thick foliage, with rainwater dripping from the eaves. The light shining from the windows made it look particularly forlorn in the darkness. "This place is really strange," I murmured, feeling a growing sense of unease. I slowed down to get a better look at the house to see if anyone was inside. As I got closer, I saw a man standing on the porch. He wore a tattered coat, his clothes soaked through, clinging to his thin frame. His head was lowered, as if deep in thought or waiting for something. Although I couldn't make out his face clearly, I could feel the unsettling sensation of being watched. My heart tightened, and I instinctively pressed the gas pedal, quickly driving away from the house. I glanced back in the rearview mirror, and the man remained standing there, unmoving, as if he were a statue. Once I had left that area, my mood eased slightly, but the feeling of unease lingered in the air. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, growing increasingly disturbed. Almost everyone in town was familiar, especially those who lived in remote areas, but I had never seen this man before. As I neared home, the rain intensified, and the headlights illuminated a vague figure on the road ahead. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, and I slowed down. I soon realized it was a woman standing by the roadside, quietly waiting for something. She wore a white, old coat, her long hair disheveled and drenched, the wet clothes clinging to her. A deep sense of unease surged within me. I cautiously drove past her, trying not to look too closely. Just as I was about to leave, the woman suddenly turned her head and stared directly at me. Her eyes were hollow and cold, sending a shiver down my spine. I didn't hesitate any longer, quickly pressing the gas pedal and speeding away from the area. Throughout the drive, my heart raced, and the rain continued to batter the windshield, as if urging me to leave. Only when I returned to the familiar lights of the town center did I start to relax. Yet, the underlying sense of unease remained. Back at home, I still felt unsettled. On this remote town's rainy streets, the night can sometimes feel particularly eerie, as if harboring unknown secrets. Since that night, I haven't ventured down that road again. However, I often hear town folks discussing recent suspicious activities in that area. Some claim to have seen strangers wandering around, while others report hearing strange noises. I'm not sure if my experience that night is related to these events, but I know that some things may never have answers. And those waiting in the rain may not be waiting for help, but rather for a stranger destined to pass by.